Today, we have a very interesting topic, and that is hybrid development versus native development. And many people think Flutterflow, React Native are native development forms. And then if you look at something like Capacitor or Despia or all the other ones, that is not native. But the way I look at that is, and that may be a hot topic, all this like Capacitor, Despia, React Native, Flutterflow, they are hybrid ones. And the native ones, that is Jetpack Compose and Swift UI and UIKit. Now, that's how I look at that when people ask, is it a real native app or not? Now, you've been building hybrid applications and native applications, and I'm selling a SaaS that helps people build hybrid applications. So I think it's just a great conversation to have. Should people build a hybrid application or should they build a native application? And when should they do what, for someone that has built everything like you and someone who's tried to sell people to go into a specific direction?
Yeah, cool, man. It's a topic I get a lot. I mean, I advise people who are doing Swift UI apps. I do quite a lot. I actually use React Native quite a bit myself. Worked with Flutter. Worked with and also with Capacitor. I remember Capacitor in the very early days back before it was Capacitor. And actually, some of the folks from Ionic, people who made Capacitor, have now gone on to they got bought out by OutSystems, and then some of them even went on to work for Xano. So I knew a couple of the
Like,
former.
I wanted to say, wasn't that the downfall of Capacitor? But that wouldn't be nice to OutSystems. Uh, it's
Well,
now more enterprise.
yeah.
It's now you need to hop on a meeting before you get that native feature added.
Yes, although Ionic was kind of heading that way anyway before the acquisition, if I was recalling correctly. And that's just sort of the way software companies go, right? Like you've got your self-serve business, you have your enterprise business. It's a lot easier to make more money with enterprise than it is with self-serve, and such was the way of them as well.
Yeah. Wonderful. So now let's say we have someone watching here who wants to build a mobile application. They say, I have this business idea. What should they do? What is the best way? React Native? Flutterflow? WeWeb? What should I
Right.
do? Bravo Studio, which also has an
Yep.
interesting way of composing it together, because if I'm not mistaken, they do native development using web components.
Well, right. You can compose web components. They will then render onto the screen using their Bravo render engine, which is then being backed by Bravo. But really, like Bravo Studio is well, actually, it's a little bit more like Despia, and sort of the hybrid approach that way, with the old school Capacitor, in that it's streaming the app, right? So Bravo actually runs all the code on its servers and then streams it to the app that's running locally, right? So you get your JavaScript, whatever, that's what you're actually interacting with. Similarly, something you build, say, in WeWeb or Wiz or Nordcraft or Lovable for that matter, and then which is a web page, right? And then that web page is being streamed to your app through Despia. That's also a thing. And in both cases, really, if you lose your connection to the network, you're kind of done.
Despia is
I'm sure.
going to add offline support, so you can export your whole file, and when you're offline, it syncs the state and catches all the variables, and then you have a whole offline experience that can store something into a local database, and then when you're back online, it'll execute the certain calls in the events, even in the background.
That's
But
cool. I
it
mean,
was certainly something my team hates me now for wanting to add that, because they're like, is this, we're doing an app in a web view here. I was like, sure, but we can try to make it possible. We made it possible, but I don't know, they haven't talked with me since a week. So
it is a technically very challenging thing to get a web page to work
yes,
offline at all.
yes.
I've actually I've made apps, hybrid apps I've made a full Swift app that then was a wrapper for a web view. I did that like whenever, like 12, 15 years ago, and it worked well. I gotta say, like that technology works relatively well. The trick is the feel of the app is the feel of a web page, right? So, and like back in the day, web pages running on mobile were very different from with native apps. And I think that the web browser, the web render has gotten a lot better. And so like you notice less of that, although it's still not quite top notch. And then that becomes, like, I think the main argument for like why you want to build given the same app, why you'd want to build it, native versus, through streaming the web interface.
Yeah.
And then there's next level up, right? We sort of talk about, you talk about hybrid apps, and there are apps that like use some JavaScript to them. Well, Flutter does not use JavaScript, right? Flutter uses its own language called Dart and compiles into each of these two environments, right? Compiles into iOS, compiles into Android. It really is Android first. It's a Google initiative, and it works okay. I would say it's sort of consistently been, second fiddle to React Native in the
That
in the
is
space.
interesting that you would say that, because for performance, I would always prefer Flutter over React Native. Like if you need
Um,
happy animations and have lots of stuff on the DOM, because I feel like the JavaScript overload that you're getting from React Native is a little bit more heavy than like Flutterflow or Flutter.
well, Flutter compiles to the compiles down to the individual environments, and that works better. It certainly works much better in Android because it is sort of Android native in the way that it approaches the world. Um, I actually think the big advantage of that Flutter has right now is in Flutter Flow.
Yeah.
That as a no code environment, or rather, it's one of the most advanced of the low code environments is Flutter Flow, and it's a good way to make an app that can be cross-platform, etc. And it's built on top of Flutter. You can use Flutter code, but most importantly, it gives you access to this visual development plane that I think is pretty good about it. There was a company called Draft, or it may even still be around, still called DraftBit,
They got a
that
new
is
landing page. They're still relevant.
they still exist anyway. But I think in the world of React Native development, I've actually found that is not the no code is not the main way I'm seeing a React Native work get done.
It's
I'm
vibe
actually
coding.
seeing it much more through vibe coding. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's because like Bolt has support for it. I don't know if Lovable does right now. But like, it's because React Native is built on the same bones as React, and the code looks a lot like React. The AI that's been trained on the huge amount of React code that's out there in the world is actually leverage that for React in a way that, like, there's a lot smaller corpus of Dart code in the world, which means that the AI is not nearly as good at doing Flutter as it is doing React Native. And React Native, the bones of React Native, like the team over at Expo, which largely runs it now, used to be mostly a Facebook initiative. It is they're really good, and it's
Yeah.
good stuff. It's strong. The You were talking about the animations. I think the reanimated framework that at one time was more of a plugin and now is really center of gravity makes it very smooth, first class experience. And now it's got more support for Swift UI in terms of the way it compiles down.
Yeah.
But the way it works is it is a native. It's a native system that runs, native components, kind of like what Flutter does, and then it has a JavaScript, uses a JavaScript engine, right, to actually run the business logic, which is kind of what I find to be kind of clever. That way, that thing is sort of deciding in a React style, diffing what's available on the page, what needs to change, what animations need to be triggered, bing, 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 and then it just kind of works, and that's been pretty impressive as well. So anyway, I really like React Native. It's my go-to for doing a lot of mobile development, even when I'm doing single platform development. And then the final would be like what you're calling, native development, and that's going to be using Objective C or Swift on the iOS side, using Kotlin or Java on the on the Android side, where you're making code that only works with one of those two environments, but also dealing with all the peccadillos of those environments. And I think the biggest advantage of doing it completely natively is getting the completely native tools available to you, right? So like things that like are available or that work differently
Yeah.
in one environment versus another, like the way augmented reality works, the way AI access works, the way that you can sort of keep on going with things that are like specific.
eSIMs. eSIMs is actually the simplest example. Like it's completely different on Android
Yeah.
than it is on iOS.
And then of course the user experience can also be pretty smooth too. If you're gonna make video games, there's really no way to do it. I mean, you doing it cross-platform is not really a great gig, because you want access to all the power, so you don't want anybody to be sitting in between.
We have a great comment from Chris. He said, "I wish PWAs were first-class citizens on mobile devices. Would just solve all the world problems." I mean, they are with Despia, but um, You
Yeah,
still
but
need the
Despia doesn't really
stores.
use a PWA, right? You're just streaming a web page, right? You're not using real PWA features because Despia.
No, it's not. It's going to use the native engine, but you can build a PWA and then get it through Despia. And we're actually doing a lot of re-rendering and UI adjustments where when you usually like get a web view and all that kind of stuff, you can feel it's a web view because you can like every time you tap a button, there is this ugly like like tapping thing. The button turns blue for a second, and then you can select random text. And if you I don't know if you hold your finger on an SVG for 3 seconds, the whole app crashes. There's some weird stuff happening in web views. We're getting rid of all of that for you. So you don't necessarily feel like it doesn't give all the obvious hints. Hey, I'm a web view. And we also have, of course, hardware acceleration, which everybody has now. It's not something to really advertise. But we also do caching. So it's going to be way faster, way smoother. But ultimately, your UI is still in a web view. So having 5,000 images on one page is not a good idea. You may want to think about virtual scrolling at that point. But you should also in React Native. But
Over all these, you can't load an infinite amount of data and then
yeah.
expect it to not sort of croak. It's going to be it'll be a bad day for somebody.
We got another comment from Chris. Flutter uses the Skia engine, which is ultimately just like a game engine. It's why you can paint anything.
Yeah, I mean, you get into the bones of these things, you're going to find actually there's some really cool technology that's used by both these things, and like the stuff that you can paint with Flutter, you'd be really surprised what you can make Flutter app look like. The question is how much work you're putting into making that Flutter app, and making it work in your particular environment.
I think Flutter is probably the closest to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, just based on the flexibility that you can do with it. Stuff.
I think yes, it's very flexible.
I mean, WebView would be the closest, but for obvious reasons. But it's a second
It certainly gives you a lot of visual control, and I think that was a key consideration when they were making it. And that's yeah. I mean, there's lots of I mean, all of the just I think people talk about these things in like semi-religious terms, right? Like, but and they'll also do like these so the engagement video X is so dead and Y is so but they're all really impressive technologies, and my shorthand is PWA is probably fastest if you have a population of one, if you don't really care about distribution. The Flutter is probably best if you want to be using a visual control plane because of Flutter Flow. I think React Native is really, really good, especially if you're going to be doing more of be using AI assisted development. And then if you're looking to really dial in the control, Swift UI is so much easier to use than the way you used to develop in Swift using interface builder and the and the other tools available through Xcode, as opposed to what it looks like for the last 24 months versus what it looked like, say, 3-4 years ago, is just night and freaking day. And
no, I think if you can understand JavaScript, you can understand Swift because all the programming language nowadays are all pretty similar. Actually.
Well,
like you got to work with type safety and all that kind of stuff, but like they are all like if you can look at a piece of JavaScript and kind of like understand what it's doing, you can understand what a piece of Swift code is doing.
And
the import statements are just looking different, but it's like it's all quite similar.
I think that's
nowadays.
I think that's true for Python. I think that's true for Java. I think that's true for JavaScript. I think it's true certainly for TypeScript, which is built in JavaScript. It's true for Swift. Less true for Objective C. Objective C is weird. Kotlin is pretty easy to read. I think there are some languages that are just sort of have their own weird stuff, but most modern languages, right? Why people don't bring out new languages that have, really weird argot to them anymore. It's it's more an artifact of, oh wait, hey, we got to use an old language that looks more like C, right? Or what looks more like whatever crazy person decided to start making variants on C in the 1980s over in Cupertino, California, because that's how old Objective C is. basically Objective-C was the alternative was called C++, which was the other more popular way of doing object-oriented C programming back in the 80s. And now, and like because Apple made that bed, it just sort of keeps on going and going and going. But Swift, thank you, Chris Latner. Swift makes a whole lot more sense. But I also wanted to touch, if I
Swift is
could, like the point that you just made, and also the point that Chris just made in his latest thing. This best bits from the best UI libraries. I think that's exactly right. I also think it's a better way of thinking about the languages, because all the modern languages are getting more or less legible. They use pretty much the same conventions. Maybe they use curly braces in one place and indentation in another. Maybe they use callbacks or promises in different ways, whatever. But the point he's making about Swift UI, I'm pretty sure was made by someone who used to work on the React team. And there's a reason why it looks so much like React in the way that it got built. And like it just sort of shows that the power of JavaScript isn't JavaScript, it's React. And that these libraries can do a lot more to teleport usability and speed of development than the underlying language does, right? It's not about JavaScript versus Swift. It's about React versus Swift UI. And when you look at that second comparison, it's like, oh, hey, yeah, if you get one, you can kind of get the other. And like, there's just a lot of value there.
Yeah. And I also think people are thinking that when they are choosing right now something to build an application, they are thinking, how can I build an application on something that will last me the next 10 years? No application ever lasts that long. It's like you should think, how can I build something that will last the next 5 weeks? And then in 5 weeks, once you get some traction, you'll reconsider what you're using. It's not a decision that you have to make and die with, right?
This is the point in the episode where I break out my catchphrase.
You will build this again.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you. Yeah, that's just.
I mean, unless you use Bubble or some other no-code tools, because they don't give you your key store, so you got to restart over for your Android app.
Well, and I think that's not the end of the world either. You keep on rebuilding. I was just doing an onboarding call for State Change shortly before this. Somebody who's, I think, in your community, and I was advising the whole "you will build this again" mantra. And the individual was not super thrilled with me for it because they had already rebuilt a whole bunch of times. But I said that's okay. I get it. You rebuilt a whole bunch of times. You're going to rebuild a whole bunch more times.
I told the same thing today, and I've been telling it the whole time. I said you'll start in WeWeb, then you'll go to Norcraft, you go somewhere else. Might as well be in Lovable at some point. We don't know.
And yeah, the other thing I was saying in that conversation, I'll also say here, is that the AI support for these tools is changing by the day, and almost uniformly for the better. So I tried that 6 months ago and it just didn't work with Swift UI or whatever, would totally encourage trying it again, because these things just work.
I remember I have many people that say, I don't like Lovable. I tried it. I said, okay, what did you build in Lovable? And they were like, yeah, I tried half a year ago. I was like, yeah, but have you tried it today? It's different today than it was half a year ago. And they said, yeah, I tried it yesterday. Some said I tried yesterday. I just don't like the UI. I said, how long did you spend time prompting in it? And they're like, yeah, I did like 2 prompts. I was like, yeah, but did you tell it how you want it to look? You can't just go to AI and say, make something nice. It's just going to do something what the AI thinks is nice, but AI doesn't have feelings. You got to add some photos in there, some links, some references. Look on NPM for some nice UI frameworks. What configuration of ChatCN do you want? Paste some components in there, right? Like, just because I think people have a hard time understanding, like, especially when they come from NoCode. Like, in NoCode, you have to put a lot of effort in to get something. And then when they go into AI, they feel like, now I don't have to do any effort and I expect the best results. No, you got to do both. You need to do some prompting and you need to do some effort. But Chris is completely right. I think Radian is a very promising tool. That's how you funnel in some unpaid advertisement here.
Well, have you gotten to use Radian yet, my friend?
I've been looking at their video presentations on X, so passively using it. I've looked at other people using it, and so far it looks like a very big pleasure using it.
Okay. The yeah, I'll be looking forward to seeing how it is in action. It's all yeah. It is easier to put together a demo that makes it look very good. And
I
then
know a
there's even
little
the
bit
whole
about that. Um, for first 6 months of Despot, the thing was pretty much unusable. But Chris, and hopefully we can get access this week. I hope so too, Chris. If you get access, we got to share one account.
yeah. I love going and checking out these new tools. Like the sort of see what was changing among them, and sort of
There's
bring.
also a very interesting vibe coding tool coming. I can sadly not talk more in detail about it, but they're actually going to integrate Despia's API for the iOS publishing and the Android publishing part of it. So they're kind of like lovable, like it's similar to Radian, I would say, but focused on hybrid applications, which I think is very interesting. So I can't talk more about it, but they're going to, like you said yesterday, not Intel inside, Despia inside.
Yeah. The componentization is a great. I love that as a business model, and the more you can put things together in a way that other people use it, that's just an exciting place to be.
Yeah, I definitely think when we are asking about native development, I think there are two stages of native development. There is you're building the application that gets you started, and you're building the application that gets you from where you started. Most of the times, Chris said DM me, I'll DM you. But most of the times, when you are creating an application, your success is based on you getting across the finish line, like just getting it done, right? And then after you have a million of users and your application crashes, you worry about some of the other stuff. But first, you never know if it's going to be successful if you can get it out there. And I personally, and I'm 150% biased about this, I feel for me, the nicest way of building a mobile application is doing it on the web. It gives me all the flexibility. I can get all my questionable JavaScript packages in there, just load random stuff inside of there, and use some of the UI libraries, then have it as a web app, as a PWA, and a native app, and then see which distribution method works well. Do I have more success on the web? Do I have more success on the App Store? There are some apps that work well on the App Store, some that don't work well on the App Store, that work better as a SaaS because it's part of people workflows. They want to do it on a computer or on an iPad or something like this. So again, completely biased on that. But I do really like capacitor-like native, hybrid native, web to native development. And you can do cool stuff. You can fully hack that whole stuff together. That's what I like about it. For me, with React Native, I've tried React Native and Swift. Of course, you desperately need Swift, but I've tried all of them. I feel like with native development, there are too many rules, and there's like a little bit less I can just hack stuff together. Where like with web-based native applications, I can just load stuff in there and I can just do very interesting stuff. I feel like you got more rules, you got less rules, and more freedom in what you can do. And personally, it allows me to move faster. I know there are people that are like me. I know people that are like thinking, what the heck is he talking about? But that's just something that how I like developing my prototypes, at least. And then, sometimes it can go beyond a prototype.
Yeah.
The ability to just update something on your web app and have it updated on your mobile app, especially while you're testing stuff out without having to go through app review every time you do a change, that's pretty convenient. But you also do have that with React Native and Expo. You can use code push and all kinds of stuff. It's just a different process.
Yes. And I would say like creating for a direct web app is certainly a smoother experience than like using code push or any of those other bits. I tend to just push directly through the app store because the the turnaround time for getting an update approved is like 6 or 7 hours.
Right.
It's just not usually that big a deal. If I'm looking to test something quickly, I can do that instantly through test flight. But
Yeah.
and then just sort of goes by the way. I sort of got my 3 levels, right? Local dev, right? Sort of push to my phone through just the wire. There's test flight, which usually takes minutes, and then pushing it through the app store, which usually takes hours. And I really like the native apps. I like the control. I like the way they work. And the and my contribution to the world of React Native, particularly like 7 8 years ago, was I was connecting it with like the local AI systems, and that's
Mm.
something that really does require having access to the native runtimes, right?
Yeah.
If you want to be a bridge to those systems. And actually, my general take is that making an app, you are best off, and that's one of the reasons why Despia is actually pretty cool, is allows you to have the simplicity of building a web app while giving you a bridge to access
We're going to have
these.
local AI come next month as a SDK, JavaScript SDK, one-line JavaScript SDK. You're doing await Despia local AI :/ query parameter with your user's question, and then under it you do const AI response, and then you can console log it or get it back into your UI.
That's super cool. Yeah, and the being able to connect that bridge is really valuable. And that's I'm glad you've got that there.
I'm going to
The
add all the sensors, NFC, local AI. Now, one thing I'm really excited about is kiosks for Android. So you can build custom launcher apps. So you can build the next Rabbit R2 if you want. It's something I'm going to make a video about, building the Rabbit R2, like this scam device. They sold like the Rabbit R1, it became a whole flop, and like the founder turned out to be an ex-crypto scam person, and like the whole controversy about the thing. I want to
yeah
make a video how I'm contacting a factory in China, getting the OEM product made, having them sideload the launcher APK app, and like having it shipped from China to me, and like make a video how I'm building my own Rabbit device. Hopefully, don't get a cease and desist from them, and then have a very
yeah.
entertaining YouTube video.
I guess we'll find out. But yes.
I won't
Um,
mention it. There'll be a black bar over my mouth and some beeping. Uh,
yeah, but I look at mobile and say the most exciting thing to do with a mobile app is to connect to things that are mobile centric. Otherwise, you might as well just, I mean, Chris's comment from earlier, you could just have like a PWA, and then it's like, you have PWA plus distribution, and that's not nothing. That's probably what most people are going to wind up using Despia for. So how do I get speed of development? How do I get ease of distribution? Fantastic.
You do, though,
Although,
have to follow minimum functionality requirements. So you do need to have some native functionalities in there.
yeah, I take your point. Like there are rules against like
You
just having a
can't
web.
just put a landing page on the App Store. Like for that, you can use App My Site and get a rejection.
So what? Good point.
Because the App Store likes apps that actually provide value.
So if you don't mind my asking, like speaking of apps and app stores, you mentioned Radian a minute ago. One of the things I can usually count on you for is what else are you seeing this week in the market?
So I like Radian, and I've been seeing more of Radian this week, and apparently Chris too, because we got lots of comments about that. I'm very excited about it. I saw another no-code tool today in our community. It's called Luna Park, and it looks like someone just knocked off Nordcraft with Out Systems vibe to it. You should look it up.
Luna Park.
Luna
Okay.
Park. Luna Park. Look it up. Luna Park. It's like Luna minus park.com. No, .app. It's very, I think they should rebrand like Nordcraft did, but they need it. It's hard to find because there's like so many stuff on the internet called Luna and Luna Park.
Mm-hmm.
Let me pull it up for you.
Yeah.
It's like if you told someone, can you just make a copy of Nordcraft, and someone said yes, that's pretty much Luna Park. See my screen?
Yes, I do. We all
Make
do.
it bigger. Okay, that's Luna Park. So pretty much it's a visual scripting engine. And of course you have your elements, you have your events, you can create your events. Let's do a click event, right? You can edit the logic, and then you have your unmounted event, your on-click. And you see, it's pretty much like Nordcraft. You can then do a console log here. Look at that, Ray. We got console log.
Yeah.
And you can just write something in there, and you can put your object. You can do string, and you can do an input for this. Call it text. And essentially, it's like Nordcraft. It lets you visually create those scripting, those formula. But it does, I don't know, it just has this OutSystems Mendix vibe to it. It's like, you know what I mean?
Why? Because of the canvas?
No, it's just like from how it looks. It just doesn't, like, Nordcraft looks more like self-serve no code, like WeWeb, Bubble. You know what I mean? Where
Yeah.
this, it
I,
has
I, I,
this, we start at $5,000 a month vibe to it. You know what I mean?
It does. And I think the corporate vibe you're talking about has to do with the fact they have tiny icons, the little
Oh yeah,
blocky. Actually, the fact that everything is tiny in order to get you more workspace, that's very much an engineering decision.
yeah,
Which I actually think is kind of practical given what they're doing.
yeah. And you can
But it
just,
is
man.
what it is.
But isn't
And
that
then,
interesting? They kind of like got really inspired based on how Nordcraft does it with the nodes, right?
uh-huh.
You got your data panel and all that stuff. I think very interesting tool to look out for, like Luna Park, visual scripting editor, all-in-one editor lets you build performant and scalable web apps, visually export clean code and host it anywhere. So they have self-hosting out of the box, and they
Yeah.
actually only let you pay for the editor.
I've been seeing that more and more. The like the premise of a lot of low-code tools was that, hey, you're going to come in, you can use our build tool, which is going to build into our environment, and then you're going to use our environment forever and ever and ever, right? That's basically, I mean, that's Wiz story. That's also the out story. That's also the Mendix story and whatever. Like you're going to use our runtime, and now you're going to keep paying for our thing because you now depend on using our thing on
WeWeb
our,
got away from that. They're now really encouraging people to self-host.
which I think is very smart. That makes it look much more like a vibe coding tool. That's where B0 is. That's where Lovable is. That's where Bolt is. That's I think where that's where Vibe Flow is. I think that's where Manus is too. Sorry, whatever it's called. Anyway, the idea is that they're in the developer tool business and not in the infrastructure business, and now they get to not have to worry about infrastructure. They can just sort of provide you stuff that works and is usable somewhere else.
Right. And
I
they
think
can just like give you a REST API to push it for you to GitHub or something, right?
well, right, you can just download it, or they can make a hook to sort of push it to GitHub, which some of them have done. Which is now GitHub's trying to make that easy because GitHub wants to be the place where all this stuff lands. So yeah, like everybody gets incented. I think a one mark of good strategy in an ecosystem like this is to make a business that makes more money when the entities around you in the market are making more money.
Yeah.
Because you can be a multiplier on their success, well then everybody's sort of positively incented. I can't tell you how many of these I run into where it's like, oh hey, you should use us and not spend your money across the street. Well, that competitive sale is a harder one to make for people who are already using a thing across the street.
Yeah. No, I think building a tool that integrates with everything, like if you build in Lovable, if you build wherever you're building, if you can sell people a tool that just they all plug into nicely, that's a great sale. That's why Xano has such an easy time selling to all no-code front-end users and React users and Angular users. I mean, if they're having a hard time in general selling to users, that of course they need to innovate a little bit more with AI. Need XanoScript implemented. They should have a Lovable integration, and Lovable should be willing to have Xano integrated in there. There's some work to be done, but generally Xano is probably making more money than the front end tools because usually people start a front end, and that's just the easiest thing to start. And when you start building an app, most normal users start building the front end because they think that's the app. They don't know that 90% of all the important stuff runs on the back end, and then they need a back end, and then no matter which front end tool they're using, they're in the market for Xano.
I think that's true for the self-serve market, definitely. The enterprise market, or even the medium-sized market, you usually are looking for a front end that's going to give you more leverage off of whatever you've got going on in the back. And I think that's going to be a key thing. Like you're right, the entrepreneurs, hey, they need a back end. There are only a couple of few options, but one of them Supabase, which is pretty programmable. You have Xano, which is very good. And gives you the no code access, although its programmability is a lot less than say Supabase's, because they have not allowed programmability, and they're going to be gating it through this Xano script thing. And then like what BuildShip, and maybe a couple, and like VibeFlow just came out, and maybe a couple others. The front ends are competing, and boy, they are able to sell a lot. Like, I think the reason why Lovable has so much revenue is not because of people like you or people like me. It's because they're making these big corporate sales.
Corporations, I mean, right. I saw some people on X, like I think it was Lovable CEO, he retweeted a job listing on LinkedIn where someone says need to have experience vibe coding. And it was like a Fortune 500 company. And he said, like, Fortune 500 companies are looking for vibe coders. Get your Lovable account. This is the future.
It is the future. I was also talking, the person I was talking with earlier was saying that they cannot consider themselves technical, right? They've been using low-code tools, going from one to another, and they were sort of turned off by the vibe coding tools because then you have to look at the code. I actually think that same individual would have a much easier time today using Lovable 6 months later. One, because Lovable is easier to work with. Second, the other thing that's really important is that these people are getting a lot more exposure to code and to how a computer thinks. Like, oh, wait, hey, that's just like that visual thing I saw last time. That's right.
Yeah.
And you're expressing it through text. There's a little bit of like, why can't it go back and forth a little more, which is a hard technical problem, but not an impossible one. And it's just not that scary.
Yeah. I mean, actually, while you were talking, I just vibe coded an app in Lovable.
Don't mind me. I'm just vibe coding an app. Yeah, and I don't know this time, but like I've used Cloud Code now a few times, and I've one-shotted complete services that I was able to deploy out to like Google Cloud Run to take care of a single problem, but like an annoying, highly technical one. And it did a great job. I was able to shove it up and was done with it. And sometimes that's silly, like, hey, this is gonna be done using Node 18. Node 18, for those of you who don't know, is really quite old. So like, let's use the current version of Node, and that outside of that, though, it was just ready to go.
Yeah. I found that AI is really good at taking outdated NPM packages where the URL of the package doesn't even exist anymore. It just does that very well. It just uses. I'm just going to use this link from Cloudflare when Cloudflare was still having a free-to-use public CDN, and you go on there and you're like, oh, they don't do this anymore.
Yeah, the 404ing of the web. There's a great. Have you seen the XKCD comic? It's a classic one at this point. About like the world's electronic infrastructure that's riding on heavily dependent on this one project somebody did as a side project back in 2003, and
I saw that with like YouTube, Netflix, and all kinds of websites all on this FFmpeg.
That's also true. That's just it is crazy where those dependencies are, and but that's the reason why we sort of look at these different tools, try to get better understanding of what's going on with them, and also like where what really matters in the world of software. That's why I thought your initial topic was so good for us to get into today, right? Like the whole hybrid apps versus the native mobile apps. Like which pieces of software matter, not just how are we trying to build, but what are we trying to build.
Yeah. You want to see my vibe coded app? It doesn't look pretty yet.
10 minutes. Okay. 5-minute app. We're going to see it.
Let's see. Let's go in here. You see my phone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So look at that. Got my app. And I just wanted to see if I can have an app built in Lovable and if it understands some stuff. And it didn't get the CSS safe area quite right with the custom variable, but that's fine. And, I can just click on here. It runs my Face ID. And then when the Face ID was successful, it unlocks the hidden treasure. And I can just do payments. I got that integrated with Revenue Cat. Look at that. You just do the payments. Let's do payment here. Look at that. And then I get the device ID, and I can load my native context in the interface. I do request permission, and then I read the context, and I get my context inside of here. And I just one-shotted that in Lovable, and it just took seconds to get it done, like maybe 1 or 2 minutes. And all the SDKs are all set up correctly, which like you couldn't do this half a year ago. So
Yep.
I think the Lovable that we have today is completely different from the Lovable that we had in the future. Of course, you need to be really knowing what you want to do if you want to have a good interface, because, the interface I showed, it's kind of a joke. But if you're willing to prompt back and forth, look up UI libraries on the internet that you like, tell it to use those, you'll be very happy with the outcomes of it.
Well, if you wouldn't mind me sort of dialing into that a little bit, because I think that makes for a very good topic for us to talk about for a few minutes, which is this idea of giving it more direction, right? I think lots of people, and in fact, I was just having a conversation last night where my hackathon partner was saying, well, we should give it broad instructions, let it figure it out. Okay, we can try that. And then you know what? It sometimes does an okay job, and sometimes it really does not. And so this is where the point you were making of hey, which libraries do you want to use? Which constraints do you want to give it? And I find when I give it those constraints, it stays within them,
V0 just open sourced their builder.
Okay. That's a useful thing to know about. Oh, and actually, what they open sourced at least was the API for their builder. The idea being you can build your own vibe coding front end for V0.
And then you pay them for their AI model.
Something along those lines, yeah. You pay
we
them.
do have that too. If you apply that, Despia is now open source too. You can pay us to use our API. There you go. Now we could put open source. Open source is not a protected term, so that's why Nordcraft is open source, even though the editor is not open source.
Yeah, it's what are you trying to do with the open source part? What are you trying to do with the closed source part? I think there's that just becomes the question is what is the job to be done? I think sometimes hey, the reason we have open source is so that if we go bankrupt, you can get it. I gotta tell you, you don't need open source to do that. There are licenses that will take care of that. The open source is also what am I trying to say here? The open source also is a way to sort of communicate, right? That other people can play with this without having to do more with it. That's kind of what N8N is doing, right? N8N is taking an approach like the community edition is open source, and then to encourage people to go build more stuff on it, which is actually, I mean, for a while they were floundering, but more recently, with the whole AI turn and when they did the LangChain stuff, it worked pretty well for them.
Yeah, I remember, and it has been out there forever. They're a dinosaur, but they were always like the wannabe Zapier. And now Zapier is jealous of them. Chris said they open sourced the entire builder. They want more people to host stuff on Vercel, apparently.
Which makes sense to me. Yeah, I need to explore more of that. The V0, the V0 SDK. right? Because I learned about the SDK part. What I didn't know is about, oh, actually, right. They have React tools for rendering the API platform content. Well, that's for rendering the content. What I don't know is about rendering the chat side of it. And certainly they have like examples, what have you, that look pretty cool as well. So anyway, those things check.
It's a clone. You should, maybe it's one of the Vercel starter templates. Who knows?
Yeah. But anyway, but getting in the for me, open source is really exciting also as a consumer and as a hacker, right? To go get the stuff, to go play with it, to go learn from it faster, to get a better understanding about how these things really work, so that you might be able to do other interesting things with them.
Yeah.
That got me into contributing to React Native. That's what got me into contributing to some of these other things I've done.
Yeah. And, everybody can be happy if you contribute to whatever they're doing because you're a genius. So.
Can I ask you? Actually, just over the weekend, I was pulled into helping someone with their open source project, sort of who's actually someone who works in the low code space. So, Nordcraft is doing that a bit. Yes, I realize, and it has had the open source for a while. Have you been experiencing much in the way of open source in the world of low code?
I'm not too much explaining open source because I remember when I talked with the Moment CEO, he said something that I thought was really interesting. He says, it doesn't matter really open sourcing a runtime that is proprietary that only 10 engineers in the world understand.
Yes, because
And I
it'll
was like,
die.
but then, what if your business goes bankrupt and then I want to self-host? And then he said, like, if we go bankrupt, why would you want to self-host the stuff that we build? Wouldn't you want to build your own? And I was like, this makes sense. It's like, why open source something and, that only 10 people in the world can truly understand on how it was built? Because it's not like those no-code tools give us pretty code. They give us code that looks like an alien. And then
Yes.
the engineer who was building this at 3 a.m. in the morning on 5 Red Bulls, for some reason figured out how to put it all together, and nobody really understands how he did it, So I don't really see the value in open source low code. I see the value in bridging visual tools into open source frameworks like Radiant is doing, because it's fully React based. And they are the first ones to have a visual React editor plus, and Chris is saying the same thing. This turns out this started as a hidden infomercial for Despia and React Native, and now we're going to do a hidden infomercial for Radiant. Look at that. But no, I think what you're doing is incredible. It's React based. You own the whole code, but you have visual tooling to make the UI look exactly like you want and don't have purple gradients everywhere. I mean, if you want purple gradients, you can add them though, but I don't want purple gradients. AI wants purple gradients for me. That's what
AI,
Chris said.
yeah, the AI does like its gradients. But yeah, the point about code from Radiant is also, I think, a good one too, because often I find that the code that comes from these systems, the putatively self-hosting code or whatever, it still looks like it was written by a Klingon.
I hope with Radiant it's going to change. And Chris is not affiliated with Radiant. And I'm also not affiliated with Radiant. I want to mention this. We're not being paid to set this. We're just excited.
And while I am not Radiant, I'm just Ray. Just Ray, not Radiant.
That's why you should like it. They used your name for it.
I'm 40%. I'm 42% of the way to being Radiant. Just wait. Just 3 seconds. Yeah.
Hey. Wonderful.
Okay. This has been pretty good. Anything else we should cover before we wrap it up here today?
I mean, I think there's a major question that we need to answer because we kind of like went to a specific direction with the topic. Now, Ray, you've been doing this for 25 years, 26, 25 when I met you. What is the best framework to build a mobile application? Like maybe there are 3 categories of people trying to build a mobile application. What are those 3 categories that you see and stay changing all the time when you work with people? And which framework is the best for each of those people in that category?
Well, I think there are people who are trying to build for people who There are people who want to build just a single platform, right? Who want to just build for iOS. And I would say that, Swift UI has gotten good enough and gives you access to all the other stuff that like building directly in Swift UI removes a lot of complexity, works really well, has first party support from Apple, and with the exception of the new Swift Package Manager, which is um, which is
It
special.
removes it removes some of your old platform capability. You got to implement device checks. We had that error. Like if you migrate from UIKit to Swift UI now and you use the latest build tools and all that, you're going to have some issues on iOS 16 or 14 with your application.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are all sorts of little individual techie builds, but I was actually thinking a little bit more along the lines of like, there used to be something called CocoaPods, which is being deprecated, and now it's been replaced because Cocoa was for Objective C, and now what we've got is like SPM or Swift Package Manager, which is a little more immature. I think outside of that, though, it's a really good environment if you're going to be doing something that's single platform, and Swift is not. It's much easier to learn than it used to be. I think the biggest downside of working with Swift right now is that you have to write a lot more of it. Because almost all Swift needs to be done in Xcode, you're now limited to like the AI/vibe codey parts of Xcode, which is not supported on first party basis the way that say VS Code supports Copilot, and it is a little bit tougher. So that's something to give some thought to. The second, I think if you're going to be building a cross-platform app, or you're looking to be moving faster, especially if you have some React background to you, I love React Native. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I would say that it is for me a really easy recommend, especially React Native plus Expo. Expo is a toolkit to make it much faster to ship this stuff up to the App Store or to Google Play for that matter. Its cross-platform capabilities are very good, and particularly if you have more comfort with a bit of code, there's a lot you can do that is sort of able to extend it from just being a web app that's just being rendered using local components to the rest. There's also something called Native Wind that's built into it, which gives you Tailwind type functionality, which is really convenient. The third, I'd say like probably for a lot of people, if you're just going to be building an app for yourself or for a relatively small audience, and you're building it for a web, using PWA is the way to go. Internal apps look like this, things that you don't need to worry about distribution through the App Store. And I think that probably there's if you are looking to have that level of simplicity and you want to be able to distribute to the App Store, that is exactly why someone should be looking at Despia, because allows you to take the simplicity of that which you might have built for one person or use as an internal app and be able to seriously consider bringing it to the rest of the world.
Yeah. And you get access to all native functionalities like you would have in React Native, just without the native components. You're just going to have one component, that's the web view, for the interface rendering.
Oh, and Chris has put into the chats here that Xcode does now have integrated with AI, or rather, the next version of Xcode has integrated AI, the so-called 26. Apple is renaming all their developer stuff
I was like
26.
the last time I installed Xcode, wasn't it like 14 or 16 or something like that?
This is like the way they renamed everything 95. Microsoft named everything 95, right? And then they just did a whole reset and said we're
But we're
gonna
still
name
at
things.
Windows 10, right?
And then they went back to number. Yes, so it was 95, Windows 98, and then Windows 2000, and then of course after Windows 2000 came Windows Vista, followed by Windows 7, followed by Windows 8. Like they just gave up the ghost on the whole year thing.
Right? It just doesn't matter. Like it just doesn't really make sense if you go from like 95 to 1.
Yes, it's all a little weird, but yeah, that's because Xcode 26 is intended for the 2026 development. They're getting it out now because I think they want to have it out for Christmas. I think it's like the new iPhones, whatever they're coming out soon, are all using it, and that seems like cool stuff. Although I gotta say, like the whole whatever it's called liquid glass thing in Xcode 26 does seem nearly illegible. Yes, I think Chris is pouring one out for the homies. The Windows 2000 that we all know and remember, and had terrible things to say about at the time, and we all regret saying those things because then we saw Windows Vista that came afterwards.
That was beyond my time, but but I did see some interesting memes. I think people compared uh, iOS 26 with Android, not Android, with Windows. What was it, Vista or something?
Who knows what it's all going to turn out as? We're just trying to make things go here. But anyway, I think it's a little bit about scale, and like how precise you want to be. One of the things I really like about Glide, for example. Glide for me really taught me what it meant to be a low-code application, because you could build an application affordably for a single person.
Oh yeah, Glide was my first step into NoCode. I was probably one of their first users. I remember, like, it was like glideapps.com or something like this before they went like to glide.com or glide.app, something like that. And I was one of their first users. I think one of the first few thousand. And back then it was still affordable. It was like $29 a month or so.
Yep.
Now it's like hundreds.
Right. They, like many others, went up market because it's a lot easier to make money charging more to a smaller set of people, and then that reopens up the self-serve market and the cycle begins anew.
Yeah, I think Glide is like everybody who considers building internal applications, because you can build applications just for you. Like, there's so much that you can automate with an application. That is really nice. What I just wish they had more, I don't know if they added it, like more ability to run custom JavaScript in there. That would be nice.
I hear that, man.
Oh, one thing that you'll be appreciating is we're going to bring MCP support for Siri to Despia. So you can register automations using JavaScript that Siri can call in your web application.
Okay, I will learn more about that. That sounds super, super cool.
So you can say like, "Hey Siri, order me my favorite coffee." And now, oh no, don't do it, Siri. And then it'll open your app and it'll run that. And what we're also going to have is we're going to have integration with the native shortcuts app, like the shortcuts app of iOS. So whenever you get like a notification in your app, you can create a hook, like a webhook for your app mobile application, where then it gets the data from the notification and creates a workflow with it. Or it runs stuff in your app when you have an automation happening.
Super cool, man.
Native stuff, and it's all made in Swift. I like Swift. It's the only code I truly understand besides JavaScript. And AI is actually really good at Swift, I think. It's better at Swift than at most other stuff, surprisingly.
All right. Well, I think that's an hour for us, man. We should we should definitely be doing this again next week.
It was a very exciting topic today about hybrid apps, React Native, and Flutterflow is really getting carried only. Flutter. Every time I want to say Flutter, I say Flutterflow, and this pretty much proves the point I just wanted to make. You're using Flutter just for Flutterflow. Wonderful. Thank you all for joining. It was very entertaining, and we'll do this again.